Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone is safe and healthy and that your public schools are functioning in some capacity. I'm familiar with many of the people who are joining today, but for those new folks, I'm Isaac Brown. I lead the Industrial Tech Group here at Landmark Ventures. Now, we've got a lot of content to cram into 30 minutes, so let's just get into it. Feel free to submit questions via the Q&A box at any time. We're here today to discuss digital transformation for industrials. Specifically, we're going to focus on business model innovation for industrial OEMs and service providers. And we're going to talk about how transformation creates risk for all entities in the value chain. How can these companies be digital first movers while also protecting their balance sheets? Well, let's find out. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. We've got John Riggs, SVP of Applied Technology Solutions at Hartford Steam Boiler, which is part of the Munich Re Group. Hartford Steam Boiler, aka HSB, is one of the largest equipment breakdown insurance and inspection companies in the world. And we've also got Ganeet Bedi, SVP of Sales and Business Development for Relayer. Relayer helps OEMs and service providers take digital products to market with new business models. Now, guys, can you maybe just briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your roles? 30 seconds tops. Let's start with you, John.
Sure. Thank you very much, Isaac. I just joined HSB Munich Re in January of this year, just prior to this pandemic season that we're all in. And when I first joined, I was head of technology and SVP of Americas IoT. But after about 6 months at the task, I stepped back and recognized this is not just about leading technology, and this is not about one technology, IoT. So we changed the name of our organization and our branding. And it's Applied Technology Solutions now. It's about delivering value. And that's a team that I focus on that does that in a commercial SME space as well as in an industrial space. So happy to be here today.
Great. Thanks, John. Ganeet?
Absolutely. Hey, Isaac, good to see you. John, good to see you again. I've been at Relay for about 4.5 years, which, as you know, I lead the sales and business operations. And it's really interesting to see us go through the journey of a venture-backed startup and then coming into a fully owned subsidiary of Munich Re and, kind of go through this journey with various business partners in the industrial world. I come from a background of, a few decades in enterprise software and hardware, and specifically at Cisco, where we went through the same transition where we were selling routers and switches, and if you all know today, more than 60% of the revenue of Cisco comes from as a service, right? So it's very interesting the transformation that Cisco's gone through. So kind of came up with that mindset from the Oracles and Cisco's of the world, and hoping to take the industrial world to the same transformation where subscription and as a service and value creation becomes top of mind, especially in the old school businesses. So looking forward to this chat.
Excellent. Well, thanks, guys. Let's start with the big picture question here. How did digital transformation and business model innovation create risk? Who wants to jump on that?
Isaac, I'll grab that first question. So sounds like really a question on the side of creating the risk, not as much mitigating or solving for the risk. So I'll try to refrain from jumping to the solution and stay focused on the question you've asked. But first, anytime we think about digital transformation, I like to think about it as technology-enabled transformation. And that usually comes along with business model innovation, invariably. So there's a two-pronged goal involved with technology-enabled transformation and business model innovation. And it's firstly to deliver value, to unlock value for partners and customers. But the ideal goal is to deliver that value while also decreasing the risk. But to decrease the risk, you have to identify the risk. And that's the nature of your question. How do these transformations create risk? Well, we've identified 3 primary risk areas as we've navigated our own digital journey and as we've helped our customers and partners to do the same. So let me break it down. Technology risk. And under that, I'm going to fold cybersecurity risk. Secondly, strategic risk. Under that, I'm going to fold many different risks that people tend to break out: market risk, competitive threats, trends, regulatory risk. I fold all of that under what I'll call strategic risk. And then lastly, financial risk. So just a little bit more on each of these. Technology risk, cybersecurity risk. Technology risk anytime you're doing a technology-enabled solution, you're implementing some form of tech. In the world of IoT, it's devices, it's gateways, it's software platforms, it's cloud services. And you have to think about the risk that that's introducing to the network and to the environment. But it's interestingly not just risk from the new devices, new technology. It can also come from obsolete technology, technology that's already been deployed that's now talking to the new technology. So you have to think about both sides of that equation. Cybersecurity risks, obviously you're introducing new endpoints, new opportunities for intrusion into the network. And that's all of our collective concern. So there's a lot of different things you do there around data encryption, device authentication, and we also can help to bring to bear some of our cybersecurity insurance risk solutions. So again, that's slightly getting into how we solve for it. So let me stick with just the creation of risk. On the strategic risk side, as I said earlier, just breaking that down, I like to think about that as market trends, customers, the trends amongst their buying decisions, competitive landscape, and then you start to think about your value proposition. And is it resonating? Strategic risk, is it the right time for your value proposition? Is the customer ready for that value proposition? Are you meeting the real customer needs? And this pandemic has made that very apparent for some of us. Customer needs are shifting. They're becoming redefined. What they were ready before, they're not ready for now. Now they're very concerned in many cases about liquidity. And so that then leads me to financial risk. Anytime you're making an investment in a transformation that's technology enabled, it involves some level of investment. So you have to be very careful on who you partner with and what experience they bring to bear in implementing that solution, in navigating that journey. And ideally, you maintain liquidity at the same time. So that's kind of how I like to frame it: technology, strategy, financial.
Yeah, just to add to that, John, I think if you don't mind, Isaac, I know you're going in and out of it, but from my perspective, John, you're absolutely spot on, right? And I think in the strategic element, being a very tech-focused organization, we had underestimated the cultural risk our partners go through, right? And I think it's very interesting. We've taken a few hundred of our partners through this journey now, and almost everybody underestimated the strategic cultural risk. So we can talk about that more too, but I just wanted to kind of pinpoint on that for everybody on the call. It's hard, you've been doing things very well, and you're market leaders in your own industry for a very long time. And it's hard to change things and, kind of manage that risk from an organizational perspective. But that's the only thing I'd like to add, which was a good lesson, at least for me and our organization, where we're going through this last 7 years.
Hey, Ganeek, just to throw you some early shade, as I think about Relayer, I was thinking about this technology risks realm, right? And I love to be in the heartbeat of technology and to be leading the technology point of the spear for HSB. But I love the partnership between HSB and Relayer, because I think about our legacy. There's expertise in engineering, there's expertise in industrial equipment, there's expertise in risk solutions, specialty insurance for the layman. And as we think about that and we pair that with Relayer, I think about your expertise in charting and navigating the IoT-enabled journey. Just understanding what that transformation looks like and understanding how to implement those technology solutions because of the experience you have in helping clients walk through that journey. I think it's a very powerful 1-2 punch.
I agree.
Awesome.
Mode. So Isaac, let me turn it back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks guys. John, I always think it's useful to apply a framework to understand a question that complex, so appreciate it. So I'll prompt this next question with this idea. I feel like I've heard the same concept explained at 100 conferences over the past 5 years, whether it's industrial, healthcare, whatever. The idea is we've been doing something a certain way for a long time and, making a lot of money doing it, and I have job security doing it. So why would I take a risk, right? Why would I even do that? So, one thing I want to just understand here is the net opportunity worth the risk for transforming to these kinds of new business models?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, I'm happy to take that, and I'd love to get John's perspective right after. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we exist, right? And it's one of the reasons we have a few companies go through this. And, I'll give you, and everyone loves sports, right? So I'll give you a sporting analogy, right? There is an offensive reason to do it. There's a defensive reason to do it, right? And, when I think of offense, it's really the opportunity, right? I mean, there is, and by the way, I'm a very big fan of the research Xeora does as a company. And, they have this big analysis. We talked a little bit in the last fireside chat too about subscription economy index. And, it's great to see how the data shows 7 times more growth, right? And 300% more value creation for subscription economy. So, there's a macro view of this. When we come to our industrial partners, by the way, a lot of them are market leaders who we work with, right? So it's not like they're under stress, but they're really looking at how do I increase my revenues, right? And if we all think of the industrial world, it's so interesting that a lot of the industrial superstars are built on building this amazing, products and technologies and, machines. By the way, 80 to 90% of the cost is actually to maintain those, not really to buy those. And although it sounds very expensive to buy $1 million asset, it's still 1/5 or less of the cost. And on the same side, of course, our partners are struggling to increase their revenues. But on the other side, from an operator of a machine, the incentives are not aligned. They only call you when something goes wrong. And, they actually have a very high total cost of ownership. So, if you think of those alignments, there's Bain's done a bunch of research on this, which I love, 15 to 20% of reduction in the total cost of ownership. At the same time, our business partners are going through 3 to 5x growth in revenue. And all of these are 100 million plus opportunities. So think of it, it's that big of an opportunity, from an offensive perspective. So I think it's absolutely worth it if you manage the risk. I think that's the important part. And by the way, like John said, a lot of risk cannot be managed by yourself. So it's really important to open up your aperture and look at partners who can help you manage the risk. On the defensive side, which I tell a lot of people, it is fascinating, Isaac and John, how many times CEOs of industrial companies have told me they see Amazon and Google as their competitors. And these are guys in, really old school, steel cutting, tool polishing world. And that shocks me, but the competitive lines are blurring. So if you don't do it, somebody else will, and somebody will come after your lunch. So there is a defensive and an offensive way to, I think about it, and the opportunity is huge. John, what do you think? I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think about the late Clayton Christensen, and he used to like to always reframe the question. So, is it worth the risk? His famous words are we asking the right question? And he would really force you to reconsider the question that frames it. And so in this, I could see him saying, can we afford not to? Actually falling down probably a little bit more on the defensive side, but it's almost like being in that defensive posture because you haven't moved for a while. So are you already finding yourself in a rapidly evolving market? Are your customers open to change, but they're not sure how to change? That's a good indicator that they're looking for your leadership. Is there an obvious customer need for your technology, but is there some hesitancy that they find to pursue your solution, your asset, make the leap for that acquisition? And then you can also do some introspection and say, hey, my business model, is it stagnating? Does it still show exciting signs of future growth, or do I see the plateau? And do I need to think about some way to diversify? So if I think about that question, can we afford not to? And then I start to compare that to the benefits of these types of technology-enabled transformations. I say, wow, I can move from chunky type sales, sometimes very cyclical, very much heavy in one quarter and lean in another, to more of a predictable revenue and cash stream. That sounds attractive. I can deliver value to the customers because now they can acquire only what they need, not necessarily owning the entire elephant when they just need to bite off a piece at a time. I can also gain more insights. I can have greater customer intimacy with my customers because as I move to these transactional type models, I can understand my customers' usage patterns, and it might unlock more opportunities for upsell around services and to improve customer outcomes. So just generally, it enables you to move from fixed to more of a variable cost nature, both a steady cash flow for your business, but a variable cost management nature for your customers' business. And that just allows them to serve their customers at scale. So I always like to think about that. Do the two-step leap. Yes, think about your own company, think about your customers, but think about your customers' customers, and what are you helping them unlock? And so, like I said, can we afford not to?
Nice. Think about your customers' customers. I like that. Okay, so we talked about how these transitions and transformations create risk, and I guess we're kind of getting around to the idea that it's probably worthwhile. But I guess the next question would be, who owns the risk for these as-a-service models of business transformations? Is it the OEM? Is it the third parties that service the equipment? Is it the operator of the equipment? Is it the people that finance it? Is it everyone?
It is most definitely shared, if I can jump in here, Ganeet and Isaac.
Yeah.
It's without question a shared dynamic. When you think about the insurance industry itself, HSB, our parent company, Munich Re, that is about moving risk from one party to another party. It's about offsetting risk with risk solutions. Risk solutions equals insurance. It equals guarantees. It equals warranties. It equals all flavors of risk solutions. When we think about who owns the risk, I think initially, before you come into the equation with performance guarantees, without guaranteed outcomes and warranties and protection for equipment breakdown, before you step in with those types of solutions, the ownership is clearly on the partner's shoulders, or it's on their end customer's shoulders. So when you introduce risk solutions into the equation, by the very definition of what risk solutions are, you're moving the risk. You're transferring some aspects of the risk. So there's an opportunity to change the answer to the question when you bring insurance into the play. But then also when you think about a transactional model, there's a second opportunity, or even a primary opportunity, to move the risk from purchasing a large piece of capital equipment to moving to more of a transactional model. There's the opportunity to move that risk to the one that's providing the service, the as-a-service model. And in that equation, now you've got this entire ecosystem. You've got operations and maintenance services companies. You've got financiers. You've got those that are managing and executing the as-a-service model. You've got those that are supplying the capital equipment. And that equipment itself, whether it's in an as-a-service model or owned as a piece of CapEx, there's still product-related liability with that equipment. So the risk is very much shared. You can make some pretty surgical decisions, though, as to where you'd like to move it. And there's an opportunity to exchange resources and funding to move it from one table to another through insurance solutions.
Yeah, no, John, you're absolutely right. And I think coming from a venture model, right, going through a few companies in the venture model, well, risk means reward, right? So there is two sides of the coin. There is risk and there is reward, and there is reward because there is risk. The question is, who wants to take the amount of risk to get that reward? It's a very well framework, as John, you put, there's a financial risk, there's a strategic risk. And, the interesting thing is, like you said, there is buckets of risk that you can put that you can manage pretty well yourself. A very simple one being, the market risk of an equipment as a service model, for example, clearly sits with equipment as a service, with the OEMs, right, for equipment as a service. Now, but they should also get the share, right? If they really figure this out and they can compartmentalize the risk, the upside for them is, like I said, 3 to 5x of the revenue, right? So the question is, where do you focus, of course, on the risk, but where do you focus on the reward? Isaac, it's a very interesting question you asked. In fact, this goes very in line with the question Steve Rock asked on the audience. I was just seeing the question that's saying, hey, do companies need to put significant amount of money for this transformational process? And the answer is probably not, right? Because it really depends on the risk you're trying to take. And if there are partners who can actually help you with this risk and are willing to share the reward, then maybe you don't need to put fundamental, big 8-figure, investments on this transformation process. And I personally am a big fan of what I call micro goals, because you don't get up one day morning and say, I'm going to do a cross-country drive from New York to San Francisco and not worry about where you're going to eat. At least I don't. I worry about where I'm going to have my dinner, I'm going to have my lunch, where I'm going to stay, what's the beautiful spots on the way. So let's get used to the micro goals, and let's get used to meeting those micro goals so you can actually see which risk is being rewarded in the right way, and move it forward. And from our perspective, and Isaac, this, you've been working with us for a while. By the way, we did a survey of 300 CXOs across Germany and the US. And it's fascinating. And I don't know if you want to guess, but 97% of them came back by saying, I want to do something. I want to do something on the business model. I want to do something on my cash. And this pandemic definitely brings up a big concern. No surprise, the American companies are a lot more pessimistic about this pandemic, while the German companies are more bullish that they will rebound back better. But besides that, 97% of them said, I am looking at all kinds of technology to do something, right? And the question is, how much do you do? And how much do you pick the risk to really go that? And maybe that, if you don't mind, Isaac, I'm going to ask a question from your behalf to John. John, what are the strategies that you see? You said there's a bunch of risk. Like any strategies, any tips, any practical tips to guys to think about to manage and mitigate the risk?
I'm going to throw you a curveball, Ganeet, because I'd love to make this less philosophical and a little bit more practical. So let's answer that question with a use case. Just one that you and I were discussing the other day, and even amongst our teams, we've been discussing this. Think about additive manufacturing, right? What do we all hear about during the pandemic? Oh, 3D printers, producing frames for face shields and using 3D printing, mostly thermoset and thermoplastics, but utilizing them to meet a critical supply and demand issue. So, Ganeet, as we've discussed, think about some of the more industrial grade additive manufacturing systems. Think about those that are more in the metal deposition realm, and they're there for printing tool sets, but critical need tool sets when the time to delivery of some other approach is a matter of weeks, and with 3D printing, you could literally have it within the day. And so we think about those types of assets, and the market at large has been reluctant to take the leap into industrial additive manufacturing, industrial 3D printers. But I feel like we're right there. We're right at the verge. And I think how to mitigate the risks that's caused customers, large manufacturers, to not necessarily jump off that cliff, how to mitigate that is maybe think about this a little bit differently. Instead of acquiring that $1 or that $2 million industrial 3D printing system, what if it were an ideal use case for an as-a-service model? And they pay for the use of the additive system when it's needed. And then there's the risk around the part itself. What if there were a way with risk solutions to guarantee the quality of that part? Effectively a certification of that part by following through the materials supply chain, by following through the processes and the production steps to produce that part on that additive system. If there were an insurance solution, a risk solution to guarantee the outcome of the part that was needed or the tool set that was needed. So this is just one use case that seems kind of ripe for the per usage transactional model, but also needs that other layer of guaranteeing the outcome, certifying the quality of the end result. So I think it's an excellent example where you can bring risk solutions, you can bring sensor technology, you can bring engineering know-how, you can bring an as-a-service model, and you can just start knocking down risks and things that have held back customers for some time.
So guys, I want to get a little more specific. I think we could do something here that'll answer all the questions I've seen popping up in the Q&A and the chat. So in concert, you take customers through this journey, right? Ganeet, Relayer provides the technology to help OEMs and service providers do this, and then you work with HSB and Munich Re to ensure the performance and help finance the equipment and the new models, right? So can you walk us through an example of what you've done maybe with one customer, just so we can kind of structurally understand what this looks like, how it works, because we've been talking really generically in hypotheticals, and it's insightful. But if we can get specific about how you've done this at least once, kind of from the full stack perspective, I think it would help everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super happy to. And to answer Steve's following question, today I see 5 to 10% of the companies really go through this journey when they start thinking about it. And they go through this journey only with CEO and CXO support, right? That's the commonality we've seen, Isaac. And one of the customers, which might be very interesting, is a UK company called Coborn. And why I bring that up is because, and it's a public case study on our website. But Coborn, manufactures really high-end, high-grade CNC machines, be it for tools, for automotive, or aviation, or be it for diamond polishing, actually, which is very interesting, which is for all the iPhone screens and MacBook screens and everything else, right? They're going through a boom. But they went through this boom, and they're selling this $300,000 to $400,000 expensive assets. But their aftermarket revenue is zilch, right? For lack of a better word. And they were really trying to figure out how to do that. So what we've helped them enable is, first of all, understand where the problems in the machines could be from an operations and maintenance perspective. What are the efficiency gains? And create 2 offers for them, right? Create offer number 1, which is an Apple Care style offer, where they come and say, hey, you buy a Coborn machine for a fixed fee, right? Minimum risk. I will guarantee the performance and uptime of this asset. In fact, I'll give you business interruption risk insurance. That means if Ford loses this machine, and because of that they think the F-150 is delayed, we actually cover some of that revenue loss, right? So which is very interesting way to think of it. And the second offer we created for them is what John said, predictable as a service revenue models. You don't pay anything for the machine. You pay $60 an hour when you use the machine, right? Or you actually, in some cases, they're trying models of paying per tool that their companies create, right? So Coborn has been on this very interesting journey where instead of selling this big lumpy, machine sales, they can either sell the lumpy machine sales without that much of a transformation, lower risk, and add the Coborn Care package, which allows the customers peace of mind, or completely transform. And I think we see that both, right? We see companies taking small steps towards a transformation with micro goals, Coborn Care, or they take a full transformation, saying in certain markets and geographies, we will only sell as a service. And the big difference in selling an as a service with and without smart technologies is, in as a service, you do need the machine data. You need to be in touch with the machine to really understand the utilization, and more importantly, the risk. Because like John said, and I'll have to get John's perspective in a minute, John said they've been doing this for 100 and X years, right, as Hartford Steam Boiler. But they do that without the context and real data from the machine. They do it with actuarial models and historic models. What we bring to life now is real data. And that makes a huge difference, right, on how you assess risk and how you think of it. I know we have a couple of minutes, but I'd love to get John's quick perspective on it too.
Yeah, I would add to it that it's the insight from real data, but also real-time data. So data that is dynamic, and with the engineering background that HSB adds to the equation along with Relayer, Relayer brings the technology enablement. They bring the integration with whatever sensor is necessary for a given application. They bring the analytics platform and the data management platform in the cloud. And we complement that by understanding the engineering associated with use of that capital equipment. And then further complementing that with, as Ganeet made reference to, guarantees of the outcome, guarantees of the performance. So we're able to look at the risks, break those risks down, and create really surgical risk solutions, insurance solutions to address even the finality of what the customer is looking to achieve. So that's where it gets super exciting, because it helps them take the leap.
I agree. And just summarize and pass it on to Isaac. I think the key is, doesn't matter if it's Relayer or HSP, by the way, right, Isaac? Right. But the point is, you need somebody who has the experience and who's gone through that. And I think most successful partners in our case have identified what's their core value prop, and where they will take the risk themselves, and where they should actually outsource the risk to anybody, ideally us, but anybody, right? So I think that's the way also to think about it. Hey, there's a lot of companies doing that, but should I work with someone who's already done it and understands the pitfalls and the good learnings, and also what I will never share as risk outside. And I want the reward for myself and what I'm okay sharing. Right?
Excellent. I think that's a pretty good note to end on. I think that's a strong way to tie the whole story together. So, and I know we're at time here. So I want to thank both of you guys. I think that was a really insightful conversation into the risks of digital transformation. To the folks who joined us today, if anybody's interested in connecting with me or either of the panelists, feel free to shoot me an email. You should all have my email address. And, we really appreciate your time. We look forward to, continuing to engage and connect with you all in the future. And thanks, John and Ganeet. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks to
Absolutely.
everyone.
Bye, guys.